I internally groaned, my head down on the steering wheel as the huge muscular man whose car I just hit tapped away on my window. The week couldn't have been worse. As if getting fired from my job wasn't enough, my boyfriend decided it was the perfect time to break up with me. Let's not forget my so-called friends who conveniently vanished when I needed them the most. And now this. Why? Why did I have to be the one to leave a nasty dent at the back of his car? I sighed, staring at the crumpled bumper of the car in front of me. Just what I needed. I dreaded facing the owner, but I knew I had to. There was only so many seconds that I could ignore his tapping on my window pane. So I braced myself, but when I looked up, my breath caught in my throat. The guy was massive, easily over 6 feet, with muscles that seemed to ripple under his shirt. He had an aura of strength and confidence that made me feel like a puny teenager. But it wasn't just his size that struck me, it was his face. He was incredibly handsome, with chiseled features and deep, piercing eyes. I swallowed hard, my mind racing as I considered all the terrible possibilities. He probably wanted payment for the damage or, worse, might take a swing at me. With all the courage I could possibly muster, I rolled down the window. "I'm so sorry," I blurted out before he could say anything. "I didn't mean to hit your car. It was an accident, and I'll cover the repair costs. I promise." He tilted his head, studying me for a moment. I felt like a mouse cornered by a lion. Then, to my surprise, he smiled. A warm, genuine smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Relax, man," he said in a deep, soothing voice. "It's just a car. Accidents happen." I blinked, not expecting such a calm response. Yeah. Still, I'm really sorry. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. The car's not too bad either," he said, glancing back at the damage. "But there's one thing you can do for me." "Here it comes," I thought, bracing myself. "What's that?" "Can you give me a ride? My destination isn't far, and my car is not going anywhere right now." I was taken aback. "You just want to ride?" He nodded. "Yeah, I'm new in town and still figuring things out." "Sure," I said, relieved and curious. "Hop in." He walked around and got into the passenger seat, making my already teeny car seem even smaller with his presence. He extended his hand. "I'm Carlos, by the way. Carlos Rodriguez." "James Calderon," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not overpowering. "Nice to meet you, Carlos." As I pulled back onto the road, we started chatting. I learned that Carlos had recently moved to the city for a new job. He was still settling in and hadn't made any friends yet. Despite my initial nervousness, I found myself enjoying the conversation. There was something about Carlos that made me feel at ease. "So, what about you, James?" Carlos asked, turning to look at me. I let out a bitter laugh. "Honestly, life's only been handing me lemons for quite some time." "Really? What happened?" "Well, I recently got fired from my job." I began, not sure why I was opening up to a complete stranger. "Then my boyfriend broke up with me out of nowhere. And my friends, well, let's just say they've been pretty useless lately. And now this accident." Carlos whistled softly. "That sounds rough, man." "Yeah, tell me about it," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "But thanks for listening. It helps to talk about it." "Anytime," he said with a smile. I don't know what came over me, but before I knew it, I offered my phone to him. Well, you can save my number, in case you need any help. You know, new town and all." My ears suddenly heated up. Carlos gave me a genuine smile, saved my number, and handed the phone back to me. "Will do." We reached his destination, a modest apartment complex, and I pulled over. "Here we are," I said. "I hope everything goes well with your car." "Thanks, James," he said, opening the door. "And hey, things will get better. Just hang in there." I watched him walk away, feeling a strange mix of emotions. It had been a terrible day, but meeting Carlos had been a silver lining. I couldn't help but smile as I drove away. A few days later, like any other unemployed person with his life savings to burn through, I was lying on my back, scrolling through different job openings when my phone buzzed. The speed with which I stood up straight, you'd believe he had video called me even though it was a normal call. "Hey James, how's it going? Need help finding a good grocery store around here. Any recommendations?" I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement. "Sure thing," I replied. There's a great place not far from where you are. Want me to show you? That would be awesome. Thanks. We arranged to meet, and I picked him up from his apartment. On our way to the store, I somehow ended up being in charge of not only showing him the grocery store, but of shopping for his groceries too. Alright, what's first on the list? Carlos asked, grabbing a shopping cart. I pulled out my phone and looked at the notes app. Let's see. Eggs, milk, bread, the usual basics. Carlos grinned. Basics? That's boring. We need some adventure in our shopping. I laughed. Adventure, huh? Like what? Exotic fruits? He raised an eyebrow. Why not? Let's see what weird fruits we can find. We headed to the produce section, and Carlos immediately picked up a spiky green fruit. What about this? Looks like something from an alien planet. I squinted at it. That's a durian. That's a durian. Heard it smells terrible, but tastes amazing. Carlos laughed. Well, I guess we'll just have to find out. As we continued down the aisles, Carlos playfully tossed random items into the cart. How about some pickles? And chocolate sauce? We can mix them and create a new culinary masterpiece. I shook my head, chuckling. You're insane, but okay, I'm game. What else? We turned the corner, and Carlos picked up a giant bag of marshmallows. S'mores? I nodded enthusiastically. Definitely. Can't go wrong with s'mores. We joked and laughed our way through the store, occasionally bumping into each other or making silly comments about various products. As we loaded our items onto the conveyor belt, Carlos nudged me. You know, I've had more fun grocery shopping with you than I ever thought possible. I smiled back at him. Same here. You definitely know how to make mundane things exciting. He laughed. Stick with me and life will always be an adventure. For some reason, that made me blush, though I was very careful to not let him see me. As the days went by, Carlos texted me a few more times, asking for help with various things. A good coffee shop, a decent gym, and even advice on where to get a haircut. Each time I was more than happy to assist. Our interactions became more frequent, and I found myself looking forward to his messages. One evening, Carlos invited me over for dinner. I've been practicing my cooking. He said, come over and be my guinea pig. I laughed. Sure, as long as you promise not to poison me. When I arrived at his apartment, the delicious aroma of food greeted me. Carlos had cooked a feast. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and a mouth-watering dessert. We ate, drank, and talked for hours. The more time I spent with him, the more I realized how much I enjoyed his company. After dinner, we sat on his balcony, watching the stars. The night was clear and beautiful, and our conversation grew deeper. Carlos opened up a little bit about his childhood. It didn't sound like a happy one, so I didn't push him further. I shared my own hopes and worries, feeling a connection I hadn't felt in a long time. I haven't felt this close to anyone in years, I admitted, staring up at the sky. Carlos turned to me, his expression soft. Me neither. We sat in comfortable silence, the night wrapping around us like a blanket. I felt a warmth in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. Was it possible that I was falling for Carlos? The thought scared me, but it also excited me. A month later. It was literally past midnight when my phone buzzed. It was Carlos. Worried, I picked up his call and the first thing he said was, Hey, you up for some stargazing? What the? Do you know what time it is? I mumbled. Come on, don't pout. I'm waiting for you right outside your place. He chirped. What are you doing outside my apartment at 2:30 in the morning? He did not reply, and through the phone, I could only hear his soft chuckle. It was a clear night, and I couldn't resist. We drove out to a quiet spot away from the city lights. Carlos had brought a couple of blankets, and we lay down on the cool grass, staring up at the sky. It's beautiful, I said, feeling a sense of peace. Yeah, it is. Carlos agreed. Makes you realize how small we are in the grand scheme of things. Grand scheme of things, huh? I looked at him smirking, and he just laughed. We talked for hours, sharing our dreams, fears, and everything in between. It was one of those nights where you feel completely connected to another person. You're a good friend, James, Carlos said softly. I'm glad I met you. I'm glad I met you too, Carlos, I replied, feeling my heart swell. A week later. These few months have brought me a lot closer to Carlos. I went from being sad and brooding all the time to happy and waking up to looking forward to the day it was all because of him. Like my morning coffee, I crave him. So, with coffee in my hand, I decided to surprise Carlos at his place. I knew he'd appreciate the gesture, and besides, I enjoyed any excuse to see him. When I arrived, I noticed his front door was slightly ajar. Thinking it was safe to enter, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was dimly lit, and only a few rays of sunlight streaming through the windows. I wondered why his apartment was covered in darkness this early in the morning. My question was soon answered, and not in the way I would have preferred, because as I walked further in, I suddenly stumbled over something hard. "Whoa!" I yelped, trying to regain my balance, but it was too late. The apartment was filled with the clatter of metal as my foot hit a bucket, and before I knew it, I was on the floor. Coffee splashed everywhere, surrounded by what felt like a lake of paint. "James?" Carlos called from another room, concern in his voice. He came rushing and lightened up the room. I looked down at myself, covered in a rainbow of paint splotches. Yeah, it's me," I called back, feeling incredibly foolish. Carlos's eyes widened at the scene in front of him. He stared at me for a whole second before bursting into laughter. "You really know how to ruin my things, don't you?" he said, shaking his head in amusement. "Look, I'm really sorry about the mess," I muttered, thoroughly embarrassed. "I didn't mean to." I tried to stand, but my hands and knees were slick with paint. Carlos cut me off with a grin. "Don't worry about it. It's just paint. But, you know," he added as he helped me to my feet, "you still owe me for hitting my car." I felt my face heat up. "I'll pay for the damages, Carlos. I promise." Carlos's expression changed to somewhat mischievous as he shook his head. "That's not what I meant, James." I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He chuckled, wiping a smear of paint from my cheek with his thumb. "There's only one way you can pay me back." "And what's that?" I asked, my heart pounding. "You can go on a date with me." I stared at him, stunned. The room seemed to grow quieter, and all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. Carlos wanted to go on a date with me? I felt a mix of emotions, surprise, joy, and a hint of nervousness. "Well, what do you say?" Carlos asked, his tone gentle but a bit uncertain. I felt my cheeks flush. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," he said, his eyes sparkling with mischief. A slow smile spread across my face. "Okay, I'll go on a date with you." Carlos's grin widened and he let out a small, triumphant laugh. "Great. Now, let's get you cleaned up. You look like a walking art project." 2 days later, Carlos and I had planned our date for a Friday night. He picked a nice restaurant downtown, a cozy place with dim lighting and a romantic atmosphere. As I dressed up, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was our first official date, and I wanted it to be perfect. When Carlos arrived to pick me up, he looked as handsome as ever, wearing a crisp shirt that highlighted his broad shoulders. He smiled warmly when he saw me. "You look great, James," he said. "Thanks, Carlos. You too," I replied, feeling my cheeks heat up. We drove to the restaurant, chatting easily. The restaurant was just as Carlos described, intimate and charming. We were seated at a corner table, away from the noise, giving us the privacy to talk and enjoy each other's company. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our childhoods, our dreams, and the random little things that made us laugh. Carlos was so easy to be around, and I felt myself relaxing more and more. As the evening progressed, I realized how much I was enjoying myself. Everything was perfect. The food, the ambiance, and most importantly, Carlos. We were in the middle of a discussion about our favorite movies when my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen and saw a name flash that made my heart skip a beat. "Sorry, Carlos," I said, frowning at the phone. "I have to take this. It's urgent." Carlos nodded, understanding. "Go ahead." I stepped outside the restaurant and answered the call. After a few minutes, as I hung the call, I couldn't process what I had heard. I just stood there for a couple minutes before I walked back into the restaurant, forcing a smile as I sat down. "Everything okay?" Carlos asked, concern etched on his face. "Yeah, it's fine." I lied, not wanting to ruin the night. "Just something I need to figure out." Carlos nodded, but I could tell he sensed something was off. The rest of the meal went well, but there was a slight shift in the atmosphere. I tried to push the conversation I just had to the back of my mind and focus on the here and now, enjoying every moment with Carlos. Later that night, after dinner, Carlos suggested we walk back to my apartment. The night air was cool and refreshing, and we strolled through the quiet streets, our shoulders occasionally brushing against each other. "Thanks for coming out tonight, James," Carlos said, smiling down at me. "I had a great time." "Me too," I said honestly. "This was perfect."
As we neared my apartment, Carlos reached out and took my hand. He lifted it to his lips and kissed the back of it gently. "Thank you for agreeing to come on a date with me," he said softly. I felt a rush of emotions, joy, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of impending loss. I bit the inside of my cheek, trying to keep my feelings in check. Carlos noticed my hesitation. "You don't have to be so nervous," he said, his voice gentle. "If you want to kiss me, just kiss me." I leaned in, but I pulled away, taking a step back. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, my voice trembling. Carlos looked at me, a little taken aback but concerned about me. "What is it, James?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "That call I got earlier, it was from Mark, one of my childhood friends. He's been MIA for a while, but now he's back and he's offering me a great job." Carlos's eyes brightened. "That's amazing, James. I'm happy for you." I shook my head, cutting him off. "It's in a different state, Carlos. I'd have to move away." "Oh," was all he said as his expression shifted from joy to a mix of confusion and concern. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes. "This job is everything I need right now, but I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave you." Carlos took a step closer, his hands gently resting on my shoulders. "James, you have to do what's best for you. This is a big opportunity." "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "But I just found you. We just started this." Carlos pulled me into a hug, his arms wrapping around me tightly. "We'll figure it out," he whispered. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." I buried my face in his chest, feeling his warmth. The reality of the situation was sinking in, and I felt torn between two worlds. On one hand, the job was a chance to rebuild my life, to start anew. On the other hand, leaving meant losing the connection I had with Carlos. "Let's not talk about it right now," Carlos said, pulling back slightly to look at me. "Let's just enjoy this moment." I nodded, wiping away the tears. "Okay." We walked the rest of the way to my apartment in silence, our hands intertwined. When we reached the door, Carlos turned to me, his eyes searching mine as if wanting to say something, but he didn't. He just kissed my cheek, his lips warm and comforting. "Good night, James." "Good night, Carlos," I replied, watching him walk away until he disappeared around the corner. Over a week later. "You're not going to spend days moping about a tiny decision. Grab a beer," Carlos ordered. It was a quiet evening, and I was lying on the couch, trying to relax but failing miserably. My mind kept racing with thoughts about the job offer and what it would mean for me and Carlos. When Carlos came to me with a six-pack of beer in his hand and a determined look on his face. "Like it's that easy," I said, taking one from the pack. Carlos popped open his bottle and took a long sip before looking at me seriously. "Just tell me, do you want the job?" he asked. I hesitated, staring at the bottle in my hands. "Yes, but..." "No buts," Carlos interrupted firmly. "Then you're going to Bogota. End of discussion." "But..." "What did I just say about buts?" I felt a pang of sadness and whispered, "Okay." Carlos took another sip of beer, but then I noticed something that made me straighten up. "Wait a second. How do you know I was offered a job in Bogota?" Carlos paused, his beer halfway to his lips. "You told me," he said, his brow furrowing. "No, I specifically didn't tell you, hoping to hide how far I'd be going," I replied, my confusion growing. I was trying to avoid making it sound even worse than it already is. "James, I'm sure you mentioned it. How else would I know?" he said without looking at me. "I didn't," I insisted, my mind racing. "I remember thinking I needed to keep that part to myself." Carlos shook his head. "I know you told me. Maybe it slipped out during one of our conversations." I frowned, trying to recall every detail of our recent talks. "I don't think so, Carlos. I've been so careful about it." Carlos's expression softened, and he placed a hand on my shoulder. "Hey, maybe it just feels like you told me because we've been talking about it so much. Don't stress over it." I nodded, still lost in my thoughts. We sat in silence for a moment, the confusion lingering in the air. I took a sip of my beer, trying to clear my head. Despite Carlos's reassurance, I couldn't help but feel unsettled. "You've been my rock through all of this," I said quietly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Carlos squeezed my shoulder. "You'll do great, James. The job is a huge opportunity for you, and we'll figure out a way to make things work between us." I nodded, grateful for his support but still feeling a nagging doubt in the back of my mind. I guess I just need to trust that everything will be okay. It will be, Carlos said confidently. We'll make sure of it. We spent the rest of the evening drinking beer and talking about lighter topics, trying to lift the heavy mood. Carlos's presence was comforting, and I appreciated his effort to keep my spirits up. But as the night went on, I couldn't help but replay our conversation in my head, wondering about how Carlos knew about Bogota when I was sure I hadn't told him. 3 weeks later. It had been a little over 2 weeks since I started my new job in Bogota. The city was vibrant, my colleagues were friendly, and the work was challenging in a good way. Despite all the positives, I couldn't help but miss Carlos. Every evening, I would return to my apartment, looking at his photo on my phone, longing to see him as I was today. As I turned the corner to my street, I glanced up and saw a familiar figure standing a few steps away from the building. My heart skipped a beat and I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. I shook my head and walked past the man, dismissing the thought that it could actually be Carlos. James! The voice was unmistakable. I froze and turned around slowly. There he was, Carlos, smiling broadly at me. It hit me all at once. He was really here. Without thinking, I ran back and jumped into his arms, hugging him tightly. What are you doing here? How are you here? I asked, pulling back to look at him, still in disbelief. Carlos laughed. I'm here for you. What do you mean? You're here? I asked, my mind racing with questions. I moved here, he said simply, his smile never fading. You moved here? What about your job? I stammered, still trying to process everything. Oh, that? I switched jobs, Carlos said with a shrug. So easily? So early? How? I asked, my voice tinged with concern. Are you not happy to see me? Carlos's expression faltered for a moment, and I immediately felt guilty. Of course I am. It's just, everything is happening so fast, I explained, feeling overwhelmed. Carlos shook his head and laughed softly. Oh, you think too much. Let me put your little brain to rest. With that, he leaned in and kissed me, a tender, reassuring kiss that melted away all my worries. We stood there on the sidewalk, lost in each other until a car honked nearby, snapping us back to reality. I pulled back, breathless and amazed. You really moved here? Yes, Carlos said, holding my hands. I brought my stuff, hoping you'd let me stay with you. I laughed, feeling a wave of relief and joy. Of course, you can stay with me. I'm just... Wow, I can't believe this. Believe it, Carlos said, picking up his bag. Now, let's get inside. I'm tired from the flight and could use a shower. We headed up to my apartment and I couldn't stop smiling. As soon as we stepped inside, Carlos looked around, nodding appreciatively. Nice place. I see you've settled in well. Yeah, it's starting to feel like home, I said, still buzzing with excitement. I can't believe you're really here. I still don't know how you could possibly switch jobs so easily and quickly. Didn't you have a notice period or something? Carlos dropped his bag, ignoring my question. He simply pulled me into another hug. I missed you too much to stay away. I missed you too, I admitted, resting my head on his shoulder. I'm so happy you're here. Later that night, Carlos emerged from the bathroom, a towel wrapped around his waist, his skin glistening from the steam. He stood in front of the mirror, drying himself off, and I couldn't help but stare. His muscular frame, the way the water droplets clung to his skin, it was also mesmerizing. I felt my ears heat up again with a weird desire. I got up and walked over to him, my heart pounding. As I reached him, I gently touched his shoulder, my fingers trailing down his back. I noticed several wound marks, some faint, others not so faint. Curiosity got the better of me, and I softly asked, How did you get so many wounds? Carlos glanced at me in the mirror and gave me a small smile. For my work. I furrowed my brow. I thought you worked in an office. I used to work in an automobile factory before that, he explained. That's where most of these are from. Oh, I said quietly, my fingers still tracing the marks on his back, moving up to his neck, tracing each scar. Carlos turned around to face me, and I couldn't believe a man this beautiful, this strong, had come all the way here for me. Our eyes locked, and I leaned in, pressing my lips against his. The kiss was tender at first, but then it deepened, filled with all the emotions I'd been holding back. I kissed his jaw, then his neck, making him groan. He pulled back slightly, looking at me with an intensity that made my heart race. "There's something I want to tell you first," he said, his voice husky. I didn't stop though, kissing his neck again. I mumbled against his skin. Carlos groaned again. "Listen to me." I looked up at him and with a coy look asked him, "Can't the talking wait?" He hesitated for a moment, and then in one swift motion, he picked me up, making me gasp in surprise. He carried me to the bed, laying me down gently. His eyes never left mine as he climbed in beside me, his hands exploring my body with a mix of tenderness and urgency. Every touch sent shivers down my spine, and I felt like I was on fire. We kissed again, and this time there was no holding back. 2 weeks later. It was a bright Tuesday morning when Carlos dropped the news. We were having breakfast together, our usual routine of rice and beans, when he looked at me with a serious expression. "I have to go out of town for a company meeting," Carlos said, his tone more formal than usual. "It might take a month or so. I won't be able to contact you during this time." I tried to hide my worry, but I couldn't help but ask, "Are you sure you won't be able to get in touch at all?" Carlos nodded. "It's a high security meeting. I'll be in a remote location where communication is limited." I gave him a quick kiss goodbye, trying to be supportive even though I was anxious about the long absence. He left that day, and for the first few weeks, I managed to keep myself busy, distracting myself with work and social activities. 2 months later. 2 months had passed, and there was still no word from Carlos. I left numerous messages, sent texts, and tried to call, but nothing. I was growing increasingly worried. The silence felt deafening, and the more time went by, the more I started to doubt everything. One day, feeling desperate, I decided to contact the company Carlos had mentioned. I hoped they might have information about his whereabouts or a way to reach him. I dialed the number and spoke with a receptionist. "Hello, I'm trying to get in touch with Carlos Rodriguez. He mentioned he'd be working with your company." The receptionist's response was curt. "I'm sorry, but there is no one by that name working here. Are you sure you have the right company?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "He told me that he was going to be working with you. Are you sure you don't have any information?" "I'm certain," she replied. "We don't have anyone by that name." I hung up, my heart racing. The reality of the situation hit me hard. Where was Carlos? Why was there no record of his employment? I was left with a growing sense of dread and uncertainty. 3 weeks later. "Who's there?" I shouted as I was jolted awake in the middle of the night by a loud banging on my door. With a heavy vase in my hand, I opened my door and found Carlos standing there, looking disheveled and badly wounded with a huge blotch of blood stain on his left arm. "Carlos!" I exclaimed, pulling him inside and guiding him to the couch. "What happened? You're hurt!" Carlos winced as he sat down. I had an accident. A car came out of nowhere and I fell. I'm okay, just some bruises." "God, it doesn't look like a car accident. Seems more like you were in a deadly combat. Let me take you to the hospital," I urged, panic rising in my voice. "No, don't," Carlos said, shaking his head. "I don't want to go to the hospital. I just need you to help me clean up and patch me up." I nodded, trying to stay calm. I gathered first aid supplies and began tending to his wounds. The bleeding eventually stopped, but I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and anger. Questions were rushing in and out of my head, raising all sorts of doubts in my head. How could he have hurt himself like this? It clearly couldn't be from a car accident. What was he hiding? Once I was done, I looked at him, my concern evident. "Carlos, where have you been? You disappeared for months without a word. I even contacted the company and they said they didn't know you," I asked in a teeny voice. Face turned pale, and he looked at me with a mixture of shock and guilt. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to worry you." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Carlos took a deep breath. "I did go on a work trip, like I told you, but when I returned, I had a huge argument with my employer. They were furious with me at something, and I quit. I was back in town looking for my previous job, so they offered me a contract position, and I took it. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to be worried about all the changes." I was stunned. "So, you weren't at the company you mentioned?" "No," Carlos admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I was with my old company. The new job didn't work out, and I had to negotiate a new contract. They must be pretty mad at me for leaving, for them to say they didn't know me." I felt a wave of relief mixed with frustration. None of it made sense. "Carlos, you should have told me the truth. I was worried sick. I thought something had happened to you." "I know,"
Carlos said softly, his eyes full of remorse. I'm really sorry for keeping you in the dark. I just didn't want to add more stress to your life. I sighed, sitting down next to him. I understand that you didn't want to worry me, but communication is important. I needed to know what was going on. Carlos nodded. You're right. I should have been honest with you. I'll make it up to you. I promise. I looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Let's focus on getting you better first. We can talk more about this later. Carlos reached out and took my hand. Thank you for being here for me, James. I know I messed up, but I'm really glad to be back. I squeezed his hand. I'm glad you're back too. Just promise me that next time you'll tell me everything. No more secrets. Carlos nodded. 2 days later. Where are you taking me? I asked as I was blindfolded, guided by Carlos. He had been very mysterious about where he was taking me, and soon I could tell why. As he removed the blindfolds from my eyes, I could see the corner of the beach, beautifully decorated with fairy lights, lanterns, and a cozy blanket spread out in the sand. There were baskets of delicious food and a bottle of wine chilling in an ice bucket. It was obvious that Carlos had put a lot of thought and effort into this. I just turned around and hugged him. He took a deep breath and looked into my eyes. James, there's something I need to tell you, he said softly. I felt a mix of curiosity and excitement. Maybe he was finally going to confess his feelings or even propose. What is it? I asked, leaning in closer. Carlos hesitated, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions. In the short time we've been together, you've come to mean so much to me. I've been thinking a lot about us and our future. There's something important I need to share with you. My heart raced and I couldn't wait any longer. Misinterpreting his hesitation, I quickly moved in and kissed him, pouring all my feelings into that kiss. I wanted him to know how much he meant to me, and I hoped this was the moment he'd been waiting to share with me. But as soon as our lips met, Carlos pulled back, his eyes wide with shock and fear. They were stuck somewhere behind me. James, we need to run, he shouted, panic evident in his voice. What? Why? I asked, completely bewildered. Carlos didn't answer. He grabbed my hand and started pulling me up from the blanket. I looked around, confused, and saw a group of policemen approaching us from a distance, their flashing lights cutting through the dimming light of dusk. The scene was chaotic, and my heart pounded in my chest. Carlos, what's going on? I shouted, trying to keep up with him as he dragged me away from the picnic area. He didn't explain. Instead, he kept running, pulling me along behind him. The sound of our footsteps and the crunch of the sand beneath our feet were the only things I could hear. I glanced back at the approaching officers, trying to understand what was happening. Then bang! A loud gunshot rang out, piercing the air. The sound echoed through the night, making me freeze and faint in fear. To be continued. Carlos! 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 This was all I said and shouted as I woke up in a very unfamiliar room. The bed beneath me was too soft, the sheets too smooth for me to consider myself hostage to any dangerous situation. My head throbbed, and a dull pain pulsed through my body, but I hardly cared. I tried to call out, but my voice was weak and strained. Carlos! Carlos! I shouted, hoping he'd hear me. Hearing me shout, someone came, but it wasn't who I was hoping it would be. An old woman shuffled into the room and looked at me with concern. Everything is alright, dear, she said in a gentle voice, though her words did little to calm my rising anxiety. You should take it easy. You've been unconscious for 18 hours. 18 hours? The reality of her words hit me like a cold splash of water. I had been out for almost a day. My mind raced as I struggled to piece together the fragments of what had happened. The last thing I remembered was chaos, but nothing made sense anymore. I need to find Carlos, I mumbled, my voice crackling with urgency. Where is he? I need to see him. The old woman's eyes softened. He's here. Just take a deep breath and... Before she could finish, I pushed myself out of bed. Too quickly. My legs felt like jelly, and my body swayed uncontrollably. The room spun around me, and I stumbled, barely catching myself on the edge of the bed. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. But then, just as I was about to fall, a strong arm wrapped around me, steadying me. I looked up and saw Carlos, his face etched with worry. He looked different. More worn out than I remembered, but it was definitely him. Easy there, Carlos said, his voice a soothing balm to my frantic nerves. You're not ready to be up yet. I tried to pull away, but Carlos held me firm. Where are we? I demanded. What's going on?
Carlos sighed and helped me back to the bed. "We're in one of my safe houses," he said, his voice low and serious. "Safe house? Who are you really?" I said the last part in nothing more than a mumble, but loud enough to pierce the silence between us. "I'm a thief. An international jewel thief, actually. I smuggle precious stones across borders." His confession hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind struggled to process his words. "You're a... what?" I stammered. Carlos looked down. "I wanted to tell you the truth before everything went downhill, but I couldn't. I thought I could protect you from my world." "Protect me?" I shot back, feeling a surge of anger. "You kept me in the dark about who you really are. And now? Now I find myself in a strange place, not knowing what's going on." "I'm sorry," Carlos said earnestly. "I never had anyone I wanted to change for, but I do for you. If you give me one chance, I'll try to change my ways for the better. I swear it." I couldn't deal with it right away. I could feel my anger fading away, but that was the last thing I wanted to happen. So I just got up and moved towards the door to leave. But I was stopped in my tracks as soon as I reached the door. Where was I? Where was I supposed to go from here? Who and what am I when I'm not his anymore? I found him when I had nothing and no one by my side. He made me the person I am today. So I know if it takes every effing ounce of courage in me to accept him for who he is, I'd do it any day in a blink. I turned around and looked at the face that had been the reason behind all my smiles these past couple of months, but also my biggest betrayal. I hated myself for how easily I found it in me to forgive him. I had somewhat forgiven him before he even apologized, and that alone was enough evidence that I was screwed. But he didn't need to know that, at least not now. "You have one chance," my finger pointing straight at him. "One chance, Carlos, only because I don't have anywhere else to go right now anyway. But if you mess this up..." But before I could complete the sentence, his body crashed into mine as his arms entwined me all over. "I understand," Carlos said, nodding solemnly. "I won't let you down. If only this little fool knew that that chance had been genuine all along." He helped me settle back into bed, and I laid there, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts swirled with questions and doubts. What did his world mean for us? Could he really change? And what about the life we had imagined together? 3 days later, the house was too beautiful to be a hiding place. There were mountains, a water stream, green lush forests around. I could barely take all the beauty in. "Ready to catch the big one?" Carlos asked, handing me a fishing rod with a grin. I chuckled, feeling a bit of the tension from the past few days easing away. "We'll see. I haven't done this in years." We settled into a comfortable silence, the only sounds being the gentle lapping of water against the dock and the distant calls of birds. Carlos's presence beside me was reassuring. It was like the old days when things were simpler and we'd spend hours just enjoying each other's company. After a while, I felt a tug on my line. My heart raced with excitement. "I think I've got something." Carlos moved closer to help. "Reel it in slowly," he advised, his voice low and steady. Slowly, I managed to pull in a decent-sized fish. I held it up with a proud smile. "Look at that! Not bad for my first try." Carlos's eyes sparkled with approval. "Not bad at all. You're a natural." We spent the rest of the morning fishing and talking, our laughter mingling with the sounds of nature. It was a simple pleasure, but it was these small moments that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, things could get back to normal. 2 days later. "Come on in," Carlos called out as he yanked off his t-shirt and walked in the water. I hesitated for a moment, then followed suit, stepping into the cool, refreshing water. The sensation was out of the world. We swam around, the water sparkling in the sunlight. We played like we were kids again, splashing each other and laughing freely. At one point, Carlos pulled me close and we stood beneath the waterfall together. The water pounded down on us, creating a curtain of mist. The waterfall was too pretty, and even prettier was the man I was standing with. His sharp features and broad shoulders, intimidating demeanor, all was very much in contrast to how safe I felt with him. "This is incredible!" I shouted over the roar of the falls. Carlos grinned and leaned in to kiss me, the water adding an extra layer of magic to the moment. "I'm glad you like it." We stayed there for a while, enjoying the natural beauty in each other's company. The waterfall became our private sanctuary, a place where we could forget about everything else and just be together. Later that night, as evening fell, Carlos set up a bonfire in the backyard of the house. The sky was a deep indigo, dotted with stars. The crackling fire was a comforting contrast to the cool night air. We sat on a blanket beside the fire, roasting marshmallows and making s'mores. The flickering flames cast a warm glow on our faces, and the crackle of the fire created a cozy ambience. Carlos poked the fire with a stick, sending a few sparks into the air. "This brings back memories," he said. His voice soft and took my hand, and we sat there in comfortable silence, simply enjoying the night. The fire's warmth was a reminder of how things could be so good, even after everything we'd been through. As the fire burned down to glowing embers, Carlos pulled me close. "I know things haven't been perfect," he said quietly, "but I'm really happy we have moments like this." "Me too," I said, leaning into him. "Can I ask you something?" I said, suddenly lifting my head from his shoulders. He slightly nodded towards me to continue. I began hesitantly. "Do you ever think about the future and what's next for us?" He looked at me, his expression serious. "I think about it all the time," he said, kissing the back of my hand. "I may not know exactly what the future holds, but I know I don't want one if you're not in it." I felt a lump in my throat at his words. "You really mean that?" Carlos nodded, his gaze steady and sincere. "Absolutely. You're everything to me. No matter what happens, I want to be with you. I want us to have a future together." His words filled me with a mix of relief and hope. I've been worried about what's ahead, but hearing you say that, it makes me feel like we can get through anything. Carlos touched my cheek, his touch warm and reassuring. "We will," he said. "We'll face whatever comes our way, together." A month later. "I want to talk to you, now." I tried to keep my voice steady, but it came out sharp. Carlos's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "What's going on?" I didn't hold back. "It's been over a month since we were stuck here. And to top that, you keep going away. God knows where at odd hours. What's going on?" "It's nothing, my darling. Just work. Trust me," he said, trying to touch my cheek, but I shifted. "What about the guy you keep sneaking off to see, Carlos? Are you cheating on me?" The question hung in the air, and Carlos's face flushed with anger. "Cheating on you? Are you serious? How could you even think that?" I stood up, my emotions boiling over. "I don't know what to think. I've seen you with him, whispering, talking in hushed voices, and to top it all, you've been secretive and acting weird. It's like there's something you're not telling me." Carlos's anger flared. "I'm trying everything I can to keep us safe and get us out of this mess. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? I'm working with people who can help us, but you'd rather accuse me of cheating?" His outburst took me by surprise, and I took a step back, my own anger giving way to hurt. "I'm not blaming you for the danger we're in. I'm blaming you for keeping me in the dark and making me feel like I can't trust you." Carlos's anger seemed to drain away as he saw the pain in my eyes. He took a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair, looking worn out. "James, I'm sorry. I never meant to make you feel this way. It's just that I've been collecting information. I'm trying to figure out how we can finally get out of hiding." I felt a pang of guilt at the way I had accused him. "So you're saying you're not cheating on me? You're just working on our escape?" Carlos nodded, his shoulders sagging. "Yes, I'm trying to make sure we have everything in place so that when we do leave, it's safe and we don't end up in even more danger. I understand why you're upset, but I need you to trust me." I took a deep breath, my anger fading as I saw the exhaustion in his eyes. "I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions. I just felt so left out and scared." Carlos came over and took my hand, his touch gentle. "I understand. I should have been more open with you. I'm sorry." 3 weeks later. It had been over 3 weeks since Carlos had vanished again. Each day felt like an eternity, and every minute was filled with worry and frustration. I kept myself busy with little tasks around the house, but my mind was always on edge, wondering where Carlos was and why he hadn't left any word. When Carlos finally walked through the door one evening, looking tired and disheveled, I felt a rush of mixed emotions. Relief was quickly overshadowed by a wave of anger and hurt. "Where the hell have you been, Carlos?" I shouted, my voice trembling with frustration. You disappear for over 3 weeks and don't leave a note or send a message. I've been left here alone, in the middle of nowhere, with no idea if you're coming back or not. Carlos looked taken aback by my outburst. He opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't give him a chance. Do you have any idea how terrifying it is to be here, waiting and wondering? I thought something had happened to you. I've been going out of my mind. Carlos took a deep breath and walked towards me, his face etched with weariness. James, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave you like this. I've been working non-stop to figure out how we can finally get out of this situation. His apology didn't ease the storm inside me. That's the problem, Carlos. You keep saying we're close, but you never tell me what's going on. I'm left in the dark and you're out there doing whatever it is you're doing. Carlos rubbed his forehead, clearly exhausted. I understand why you're upset, but I was working on something I couldn't discuss until it was finalized. It was important for our safety. Safety? I snapped. What about my sanity? I need to know what's happening, not just be left here with no clue. Carlos looked at me with a mix of frustration and regret. I know it's been hard, but what I'm doing is hard too. The truth is, I've been negotiating with people who could help us escape. It's been a complicated process, and I couldn't risk any details leaking out. I threw my hands up in exasperation. So, you're telling me that you couldn't even drop me a message or a note? Just something to let me know you're okay and that there's a plan? Carlos sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping. I thought it was safer this way. I crossed my arms, still feeling the sting of abandonment. Well, it didn't work out very well, did it? Carlos stepped closer, his gaze softening. James, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to come back to you with good news. And what? Have you come with good news? Carlos nodded, a faint glimmer of hope in his eyes. Yes, we're very close. I've secured a safe route and made all the necessary arrangements. We should be able to leave soon, but I needed to finalize everything before I could tell you. I felt a mix of relief and lingering anger. I hope so, Carlos, because I can't keep going like this. I need to know that there's an end in sight. Carlos's eyes were filled with sincerity as he looked at me. I understand. I promise you. I'm doing everything I can to make sure we can finally leave this behind and start a new life together. I just need a little more time to wrap everything up. I nodded, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease slightly as Carlos pulled me into a hug, holding me close. So, how are you going to make up for it? I asked. Huh? The emotional distress you have caused me over the month. How are you planning on making up for it? Carlos's eyes lit up with understanding. I get it. What do you want to do? I can arrange something here, or we could go out to a nice restaurant. I shook my head, feeling a surge of frustration. I'm tired of being cooped up here all the time. I want to do something different. How about going to a concert? It's been forever since we did something fun like that. Carlos looked a bit taken aback, but then nodded slowly. A concert, huh? I'm not sure that's a good idea. Please, please, please. Just for a couple of hours. Not for long, please. I pleaded with him with puppy eyes. I know always works. I suppose a few hours out of the house might be good for us. Let me see what I can arrange. He agrees, accepting defeat. The next night, the place was packed with people and the energy was electric. I could hardly contain my excitement. Carlos and I found our spots, and as the lights dimmed, the crowd erupted into cheers. The band took the stage and the music filled the air. We sang along to every song, our voices blending with the crowds. It felt amazing to let loose and enjoy ourselves like we used to. Carlos kept glancing at me with a huge smile on his face. During one of the slower songs, he pulled me close and we danced together. The closeness was comforting, and I felt a sense of happiness I hadn't experienced in a long time. As the night went on, we shared kisses and whispered to each other in between songs. It was like a weight had been lifted, and we were simply enjoying being together without the constant worry of our situation. I'm really glad we did this, I said, leaning into Carlos as we walked back from the venue. It's been so nice to just forget about everything for a while. Carlos smiled, his eyes twinkling in the city lights. I'm glad too. It was nice to see you happy. We needed this. But as we turned into a quieter street a few blocks from where the concert had taken place, the atmosphere changed abruptly. We noticed a group of armed police officers standing in our path, their uniforms reflecting the streetlights. My heart skipped a beat and I could feel the excitement of the night slipping away, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Carlos, what's going on? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Carlos's face turned pale as he spotted the police. He didn't answer me. Instead, he grabbed my hand tightly and whispered urgently, "We need to run. Now." Before I could react, Carlos was already pulling me towards an alleyway. My mind went blank as I followed him, panic rising. We dashed down the narrow path, but the reality of our situation hit me hard. I felt like I was moving in slow motion, my heart racing with fear and confusion. We reached the end of the alley, but as Carlos turned to look behind us, there was a loud, sharp sound. I flinched and saw Carlos stumble, clutching his left leg. It was all chaos, and I felt a wave of cold fear wash over me as my legs gave way too, and I sank to the ground beside Carlos. The police officers appeared at the entrance of the alley, their guns drawn. One of them shouted, "Stay where you are! Don't move!" Carlos struggled to get up, but his injured leg wouldn't cooperate. The officers rushed over and quickly subdued him. I sat on the ground, paralyzed by the sight. I could hardly believe what was happening. The police checked Carlos, and one of them found something in his innermost pocket. I couldn't see clearly from where I was, but I saw the officer's eyes widen as he pulled out a glimmering diamond. My heart sank as I recognized it. It was the Cullinan I, the great Star of Africa diamond. The reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. Carlos hadn't changed. He was still involved in his old work. All the promises he had made to change his ways, to start fresh, were empty. The very thing we had been trying to escape from had caught up with us. The officers handcuffed Carlos, his face contorted in pain and disbelief. They started to lead him away, and I watched in stunned silence. Carlos's eyes met mine for a brief moment, and there was a look of regret and sorrow. I felt a pang of sadness and anger all at once. The police officers took Carlos to the hospital, and I was left alone, sitting on the cold pavement, hidden in the darkness. A few officers came over to question me, but their words barely registered. I was too lost in my own thoughts to really process what they were saying. They asked about Carlos, about the diamond, but all I could do was shake my head and give them the bare minimum. Eventually, the officers left, and I was sitting there, the weight of the truth and my reality crashing down on me. 3 days later. The past couple of days have gone in a blur. I went back to our secret house as I didn't know where else to go. However, the place constantly reminded me of all the good times we had and all the promises he had broken. The news about Carlos's arrest was everywhere. I couldn't escape the reminders of what had happened. Each headline and every report felt like a punch to the gut. Of course, I hadn't heard him until the third day, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me answer. I hesitated for a moment before pressing the receiver to my ear. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling. "James?" Carlos's voice was a mix of relief and sadness. "It's me." I felt a surge of emotions. Anger, betrayal, sadness. All of it hit me at once. "I don't want to hear anything from you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't want you to contact me again." There was a brief pause on the other end. I could almost hear Carlos gathering his thoughts. "James, please. This is the only call I'm allowed. I need you to hear me out. Please don't hang up." I didn't reply, and he took my silence as an agreement. Carlos's voice softened. "I'm sorry, James. I know I don't even deserve to ask for forgiveness, but I need you to know something. I truly wanted to change for you. It was just one final project before I moved, far away from all of this, with you, and lived the simplest, happy life we talked about. I meant it, and when I said I wanted to change for you." "I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Carlos. Everything you said turned out to be a lie. How can I believe this is any different?" Carlos's voice was filled with desperation. "Check the side drawer of our bed." I felt a pang of curiosity mixed with frustration. "Check the what? What's there?" "Just check it, please. It's important." Reluctantly, I walked over to the bedroom and opened the side drawer of the bed. Inside, I found a small stack of papers and a couple of envelopes. My heart raced as I picked them up and began to look through them. There were 2 plane tickets, along with our visas and passports. My hands shook as I unfolded the documents. There was also a set of papers with the heading of an apartment registration and a key. I looked at the items, my mind racing. "Carlos, what is all this? Why are these here?" Carlos's voice was steady but filled with sadness. "I've been preparing everything for us. I bought the apartment for you, James. It was supposed to be our fresh start. I wanted to change for you, but I failed. I want you to keep the apartment because it was meant for you. It's a place where we can start over if you still want to." Something snapped in and all the pain I had been holding in got loose. I broke down. When will you come back? Will you ever come back? I could tell Carlos smiled. Of course, I will come back, baby. Where else could I go? I don't know when, but I promise I will be back. I want to be with you, and I want to make things right. Please believe me. I wiped away my tears, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. I'll keep the apartment. I'll wait for you. Please come back soon. Carlos's voice was warm and comforting. I promise, baby. I'll come back as soon as I can. Until then, take care of yourself and remember, I love you. And with that, the phone hung up. Carlos was sentenced to 12 years in jail. It was all over the news. It saddened me, of course, but it also meant that I knew exactly how long I was supposed to wait. I, on the other hand, shifted to the new apartment and waited for him to start living our life together, exactly the way he wanted us to live. Conclusion. Carlos kept his promise. He came back. It wasn't easy. 12 years in jail changes a person in a way you can't understand. But I knew deep down he was the same Carlos who I fell in love with. The one who would do anything for me and I for him. It took us much effort, but together we slowly were able to overcome all the challenges that stood in the way. We still have a long way to go, but after everything we have been through, I'm sure with each other's support and the love we have in our hearts for each other, we will be able to overcome anything. For us. For our future together. The end. How long can you wait for the one you love? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force, and to stay wholesome.